Hey, it's Brian from Mighty Startup, and today we're going to answer the question, what distinguishes a good C of A from a bad C of A? And I'm going to tell you right now, the format of a C of A varies across the industry. Some suppliers provide a really technically sound certificate of analysis, and others don't do a great job of it. And I've seen the entire spectrum. And today I want to go through an example C of A and kind of call out what may seem to be fairly innocent things or things that a brand owner or an entrepreneur might not really pick up, but explain why these are actual issues. We're going to dive into that. And the biggest message I want you guys to realize is that, as a brand owner, as you're starting up as an entrepreneur, you're most likely relying on your contract manufacturer to determine the specific parameters your finished product needs to be tested against as part of this release procedure, right? Before it goes into market, you need to test against all these parameters. And obviously you don't have the expertise for it. And so you're relying on your contract manufacturer for that advice and feedback. Here's the problem. If we do that, technically there shouldn't be an issue, but a manufacturer also has a couple interests in mind. Number one is costs, right? They want to save money, increase those profit margins. And B, they want to make sure that the parameters aren't so tight that it's going to create issues. As in, if the parameters are super, super tight, then there's always going to be some sort of reject or reason to hold it or a reason to evaluate the test result further. And it slows them down operationally. And they don't want that either. And so when you factor those things in, the contract manufacturer is likely to create fairly loose parameters so that A, it saves them money. They don't have to test as much, for example. And B, they won't get a lot of failures or issues where they have to go investigate. And they're relying on you not knowing this stuff, right? And so it hurts you as a brand owner. You're taking on more liability. You're taking on more risk inherently so that your C of A isn't well done. FDA or a retailer that wants to bring your brand in, they're going to start poking at it and they're going to realize there's all these holes. And if your C of A isn't good, what does that say about your product? Right? Or just from a purely compliance standpoint, if FDA were knocking on your door and you don't have a good C of A, they're going to start asking a whole bunch of other questions, right? Which obviously you don't want. So that's the big overarching message, but let's dive into the C of A and see how this plays out. This is your first time looking at a C of A. C of A stands for Certificate of Analysis, which is what you have up top. And as you guys can tell, I've obviously redacted this because I'm making this video for you. It's the test results on a technical document, an official document, and it's going to tell you the product name, the formula code, finished product code, the packaging type, etc. in this particular document, this one that you're seeing. But like I said, there's no official standardized format. Some suppliers, might not include their formula code. Others might. Some might add storage conditions while others don't. So there's a lot of variability here. But right away, we want to know, what am I looking at, right? Covered this, but this should also have a lock code in there. That's absolutely key. You need to know which batch these test results are tied to. Let's talk about the next one, which is the quantitative label claim. And this is typically what we are all accustomed to when we're reading stuff in the news. Product being tested is not meeting label claim, like all these dietary supplements that are on the shelf are actually misbranded, or they're misrepresenting themselves, or they're trying to scam the consumer because they don't have the vitamin C content that the label said that it had. So this section is supposedly testing for the amount. And again, as a layperson, when you look at it, you're like, great, you've got a vitamin A, you got a specification of greater than or equal to 300 micrograms RE, which is on the label. Sounds like great. You got a method there. Passes. Perfect, right? When someone that's more well-versed in this document, there's a lot of holes here. And so the first one is, if we look at the test method, it's an asterisk. Well, what does that mean? It says verify in raw material control and in-process manufacturing. So what does that mean? That means that we're not testing the finished capsule for the vitamin A content. We're just verifying it through your raw materials. So they're testing the raw materials perhaps, and they're doing in-process manufacturing checks. I don't know what that entails. We don't know what in-process manufacturing checks are, and we don't know what they mean by verifying and raw material control. We have no idea. Big takeaway is essentially they're not testing the finished product for vitamin A and vitamin C content. And that could be an issue, right? That could be an issue for you as a brand. Maybe it's important from a quality standpoint that you're testing all of these things. It could be important to your retailers or to your customers. The fact that you got an asterisk in there, you think an Amazon's going to be okay with that? No. You think Whole Foods is going to be okay with that? No. They're going to be picking up on this and be like, well, what exactly are you using to determine that there's actually 300 micrograms RAE of vitamin A? By regulation, FDA understands sometimes you have method interference. Sometimes there's no test method for a particular active ingredient available, right? There could be a scientific reason why you can't test it. In those instances, sure, you can't test, and then you're going to have to do it through in-process checks or some sort of raw material testing. But for everything else, you should be testing. If you look down the entire board, none of it's tested, right? Which is concerning. It should be a flag and something that you want to talk to the manufacturer about. And this is why, by the time there's a C of A, and if this is your first time seeing it, you're having all these questions, it's almost too late. When I'm working with clients, it's about developing your parameters, your specifications, your testing parameters as you're developing a product in unison. And it's important to do that so that you can talk through the right parameters to test for, so we can all agree upon the right expectations from a compliance side, a brand owner side, and of course the manufacturer. But then if you look at the results, it just says pass. It doesn't tell you the actual number, and they can't tell you the actual number because they didn't actually test the active ingredient in the finished product. And Amazon has been really explicit about this. You can't just put a pass fail answer in the field. You actually have to tell us what that number is. Either go to your manufacturer, have them reissue a new certificate of analysis, or go and get this tested yourself. Just imagine the scenario where you test it and then your vitamin A comes in at 150 micrograms. Then what? Now, right? What are you going to do? You're going to bring that to your manufacturer. You guys are going to, discuss. You're going to be like, dude, I just spent $5,000 to get a compliant product out the door, and you gave me something with half the potency for vitamin A. And they're going to go back and say, no, we did our checks and then you agreed to these specifications, because they're kind of relying on you not knowing the regulations, which irks me to no end. And I say this to a lot of people I work with, I shouldn't have a job, right? Because if the manufacturer did the right thing from the beginning, I wouldn't be where I am now, right? Helping other clients. And it's crazy because you see this with even the largest global CPG brands out there. They use contract manufacturers. They also have internal in-house manufacturing. But there's a reason why they have a compliance team to look after the contract manufacturers. There's a reason for that, because even when they're that large and have all this leverage and these huge volumes and they're making great sales, they still need someone to watch over these contract manufacturers, because it goes back to that initial message. There's an inherent interest for the manufacturer to do it their way that's more in line with their interests. Let's go down to heavy metal testing. Here's a good example of them trying to rely on you not knowing stuff. So the heavy metal testing, if you look at the specification, it just says report in micrograms. So it says as arsenic, as your testing parameter, you just report in micrograms. So essentially what it's saying is there is no specification. It's not a pass fail. It's nothing. It's just whatever result you get, just report it. That's all it's saying. So your arsenic level could be sky high, no problem. As per this specification, it just tells the analyst to report it. And that's all I did. So if it's sky high, I'm reporting it and I'm leaving it alone. And you're reporting things in MCGs, PPMs, PPBs. The average person has no idea what that refers to. And they're like, okay, if my manufacturer sent me a CVA, I guess that's fine. And so this parameter I cannot stand. As you can tell, you want to know if it's a pass-fail scenario. If it didn't pass, at least they can go hold it. It's not going to leave the factory. Then they can figure it out and solve it. And if it's a pass, it's a clear pass, right? If FDA starts knocking on your door, if a litigator starts knocking on your door and says, hey, your product has heavy metals, and you show them this, and that's your certificate of analysis, your test result, they'll just laugh at you and like, okay, that didn't help you, it actually hurt you. And so that's my biggest gripe here. This report in micrograms is horrible, but again, how would we know when you have a method? Sounds so official, AOAC 993, right? And then here's the other rub, the results. Love this. It just says 1.76 micrograms. Is that like per capsule? Is that per serving? Like, is that per gram? How do I interpret these results? And this is a big problem. So, this particular client's obviously spending good money for this additional heavy metal testing, right? I don't know, making up $250 a pop per batch. These results are essentially meaningless. Like there's no value here other than that they know how much arsenic is in their product. It doesn't protect them from a compliance standpoint. It doesn't protect their consumer. It doesn't protect the business, right? From the standpoint of either giving them clear pass fail criteria or holding products so it doesn't leave the facility and making sure that only compliant stuff goes to you. So they're paying $250 for essentially nothing, right? Which is silly. And this is why, again, your parameters, your specifications needs to be developed as you're developing your product. If I go down to the microbiological, I'm not going to go into the specifics because I could talk about this forever. Only one I want to bring up here is the highlighting part, which is less than or equal to 50,000 CFU per gram. Is this number a big number or a small number? Now, to the manufacturer, this is the parameter that they've established. I'm always looking at it from the point of view is like, is that too loose for them? Is that within their interest? Or is that a legitimate number? And I'm not expecting brand owners or anyone to figure that out. Understanding the right microbiological parameters is not necessarily easy. But my first question is like, that number seems kind of high. And I'm like, well, why is it so high? And there could be a legitimate reason for it, but I'm always trying to tighten those because right from the microbiological side, that's a safety thing, right? So you really want to encourage a tighter limit to encourage the manufacturer to be super clean, have good GMPs, good manufacturing, cleaning controls, etc. And when the numbers get really loose here, like what else are they loose on? No idea. But, in this case, the number, the results came in really, really clean, like less than 10 CFU per gram, which is a good number. But then I'm like, well, why are you guys picking such a high number, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And there's a part of me that goes back to like, they're going for what's convenient for them here, right? But that takes more exploring. That's pretty much it from a C of A standpoint. Hopefully you found this insightful, helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions. Let me know in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you. And if you guys haven't yet, check out my other videos. Watch my playlist. Watch the Q&A playlist. Guys, it was a pleasure doing this video. I will talk to you in the next one. Cheers.